So welcome again to today's webinar. So before we begin, I'd like to share a little background on this virtual training series. We've designed this new series with two objectives in mind. One, we will be featuring the expertise of campaign partners in the field, and we will focus on specific outreach strategies and skills that you can immediately apply to your work. So look forward to future virtual trainings as well, and if you have expertise in a topic that you would like to share with your peers, definitely reach out to us. We'd like to take a few minutes to ask you a few questions. We have a few poll questions to learn a little bit more about you and who's here with us today. The first question is about your organization. What type of organization do you represent? Please select all that apply. 1, community-based organization. 2, government agency. 3, tax credit outreach or asset building coalition. 4, college or university, or 5, other. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the poll. It looks like the majority of you are from community-based organizations. About 75% of you are community-based. 12% are government agencies. 30% of you represent a coalition. 7% are a college or university, and 5% are other. Thank you for participating. We'll now turn to our next poll question. How familiar are you with Fafsa and how it intersects with VITA? 1, not familiar at all. 2, have basic knowledge of Fafsa. Or 3, proficient knowledge of FAFSA and VITA. Okay, thank you for your participation. So most of you, about 55%, have basic knowledge, 18% are not familiar at all, and 31% of you have proficient knowledge. And our final question for you at this time, are you familiar with facilitated self-assistance, also known as FSA, and other self-preparation programs? 1, you're not familiar at all. 2, you've heard of it, but your organization doesn't use it. 3, you have basic knowledge. Or 4, your organization uses a self-preparation program. Okay, and looks like most of you do use it in your programs at about 31%, and 29% of you do not use it at all, and then 22% of you have heard of it, and 20% of you have basic knowledge. So we look forward to this training being able to provide you all with more information. So now we'll have a brief introduction of our presenters today by Evelyn.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us in this webinar. I think it will be very informative because we have wonderful panelists or presenters here to discuss some topics that would hopefully help your organization. First up, we have Karen Arista, who's the Financial Stability Coordinator with the United Way of Southern Cameron County. Karen collaborates with community partners to improve the financial well-being of families living in the southern tip of Texas, along the Texas-Mexico border. The Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, or VITA, project, including My Free Taxes, are a large piece of her work. She has led a coalition of VITA partners for 8 years now, providing coalition building, resource development, volunteer training and marketing, as well as managing a full-time VITA site and facilitated self-assistant MFT site. Our next presenter is Amanda Grover. Amanda is the Career Supports Manager at Goodwill Industries of West Michigan. She has been working with the VITA program for 4 years now. She coordinates efforts to connect non-traditional resources and services to tax preparation within her community. Our final presenter is Christine Chen. Christine is the Executive Director of Ladder Up, a Chicago nonprofit that offers free tax, financial aid, and financial education services. Christine was involved with the implementation of the organization's financial aid program in late 2004, and is pleased to share more about the program's growth since that time. We'd like to thank these 3 ladies once again for being here today.
Thank you. So before we have a chance to hear from them, we're going to share just a little bit of background about why we're actually here with this focus. So there are several ways that the Earned Income Tax Credit, the free application for federal student aid, and volunteer income tax assistance overlap. So 3 ways quickly. One is eligibility. So for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you must have income less than about $53,000 to go to a VITA site. Generally, it's about $54,000. It may be a little more or less in your specific community. And for applying for federal student aid, there isn't a specific income limit, and it's primarily based on financial needs. So for families that are eligible for the EITC and VITA, they're likely to be eligible for federal student aid as well. Next, the overlap is with tax filing. So there is a requirement to file a tax return for both the Earned Income Tax Credit and for student aid. And then finally, we have timing. The application for federal student aid overlaps with the tax season. Exact deadlines for submitting the application will vary by state. For federal assistance, generally it's due by June 30th of the year. So what are some reasons why eligible families do not actually file for federal student aid? Well, there are 3 primary reasons. One is that the application is too difficult. Some families become intimidated by the process and don't attempt to even pursue it. 2, it also may be challenging, especially for families that speak English as a second language. Students who have low grades may think that they are not eligible for aid, and families sometimes believe that they cannot afford college, so why even apply for aid? So let's talk about those and some of the truth behind each of those statements. So 1, with the application being too difficult, help is available. You'll hear from our panelists shortly about how they provide assistance. And also the application has changed over the years and has become more streamlined. 2, students have low grades. Eligibility for student aid is not based on academic performance. So this actually is something that is a myth that should be corrected as part of your outreach efforts. And 3, families don't believe they can afford college. Well, there are different ways to finance college, and some forms of aid, like Pell Grants, don't have to be repaid. There also may be some families who are concerned about how federal aid will impact their Earned Income Tax Credit. The EITC is counted as family income in determining financial aid eligibility. For many low-income students or who work or their parents, the EITC will not affect the financial aid amount or their eligibility. And so the EITC can actually enhance a federal aid package. So how can you assist families? 1, incorporate FAFSA promotion into tax credit outreach. 2, organize outreach events that focus on federal student aid and tax filing help. And 3, establish an independent student aid program, assistance program. And this is going to be the focus of our training for today. So now I will turn it over to Karen.
Great, thank you so much. This is Karen, and let me make sure I've got control over the screen. All right, I'm not able to advance the screen. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you advance the screen for me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me give a little intro, and then we'll quickly go through my PowerPoint. Well, hello everyone, and I am sitting here in my office in Brownsville, Texas, where it's nice and warm, and I hope you are as warm as I am. I don't know what the weather's doing in the rest of the country. We've been providing volunteer income tax assistance as a coalition. United Way has been the lead agent of a coalition down here on the very tip of Texas, and it covers one county area, Cameron County. And we have a coalition of about 16 community partners that provide free tax assistance. Just to give you an idea of our size, we will do around 4,000 tax returns this tax season. Last season, for the earned income tax credits that we tracked, our VITA site did 3.6 million of the EITC. So that kind of gives you, we're a smaller area, we're not a big state coalition, but when we look at our target population down here, about 77% of the families in our area qualify for earned income tax credit. It's a very low income area down here, and the need is huge. So for just families that need help to become financially stable. And as we look at the VITA services, and when we look in terms of EITC and FAFSA and schools, the reason United Way started really looking into this is that we saw that, of course, families need access to their benefits. We've been doing the education about EITC for years, but we've also been working closely with workforce development in our area, and we just really see the connection between the students that are in high school and how they need a pathway to get to college. And most of the students in our area must get financial aid in order to be able to attend a community college or university. Then as part of that, they're often missing soft skills, work skills. They just need so much to succeed in the workforce that we're trying to not just get them to college, but see them move through college for some kind of coursework certification and get a job that pays them a living wage. So that's a lot of what has interested us in the program. So the high schools that we've started working with, their big need, as they see, is, and they look at FAFSA completion for their seniors, and they track the rate for all their seniors that have completed FAFSA applications. Talking with our local college here, we've had financial aid director who told us when we first started having discussions about working with them that one of the largest reason they saw for a FAFSA student who had an incomplete FAFSA application, in other words, they started the FAFSA application, but they left it open and never completed it. The #1 reason for that was incomplete tax data. And so that was kind of a need the college expressed to us and was what got us all talking together to plan. So if you can go to the next slide, I'm just going to kind of show you what we started doing as a coalition. We started building the high school program, and click through that as quickly as possible. I always forget that this is a PowerPoint I use in the community, and I always forget that I do it line by line, but that doesn't help on this kind of webinar. We're trying to institutionalize VITA, and we're really trying to find partners where VITA can live. And the high schools have been a good match. It's a great service learning project. The students they get volunteer service hours, they get a certification, and they develop work and interview skills that help them get jobs. So basically, if you can keep going, I've already mentioned this stuff. Keep going. So when we talk to schools, we ask them how they can participate. Okay, stop there. Thanks. We either ask them to host a VITA site or partner with another site to provide volunteers. And basically, when a student volunteers, they're going to we let juniors and seniors participate in the program. And this is kind of how we sell it to the schools. They'll train in basic tax law at the school. Usually a teacher is leading them through that process. It's often a part of their clubs in the business accounting department. BPA, the Business Professionals of America, love VITA program. We've had a lot of our high schools that will do this as a club of 6 to 12 students, and then they take it to competition. We're seeing a lot of the students, the seniors that have participated in VITA are often among the those that are winning some of the big full ride scholarships out of state, and they're telling us that they've used their VITA volunteerism to be that interview. The schools are real interested in that. That helps them win the big scholarships. So the students certify online as VITA tax preparers. It gives them a certification from the Internal Revenue Service. That's a big deal when you're a high school senior or even when you're in college. And then they get volunteer service hours that are documented and then acknowledged by the Internal Revenue Service. And they get the certificate of appreciation there. And they're developing marketable job skills. We also pull all of our student volunteers together at the end of the tax season. We do an interview, we do a workshop with them to develop their interview skills, have them talk about what their experience was like and what they did in the VITA program. Young people often don't know how to talk about what they're doing, how to really get across to someone the impact they've had, and that's what we do with them. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. All right, so these were just some of our high school students. So the high school students alone in our coalition prepared 929 tax returns last year, and they were responsible for over $1 million of earned income credit coming back to the families here. We had 195 students working in the program. So it is significant what they're doing. So go ahead, next slide. This was just the different high schools and then and their individual results. We work with, at the moment, 3 different school districts, and and we're expanding. I know we've got 2 more school districts that want to come on board this year. At the bottom there, we work with 2 colleges, the Texas Southmost College and then the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. And that's where the bulk of our volunteers work. Next slide, please. Life skills that are learned through VITA: communication, dealing with difficult people, hands-on experience. We do a lot of ethics work with them, standards of conduct within the VITA program, problem-solving skills, research skills. And this is a lot of how we sell this to the schools and the administrators. Next slide. So some of the success we've had in the high school program is that by working with the Brownsville Independent School District, it's a very large district. There are 6 high schools in the district. And we actually were able to institutionalize the VITA program in the school district as the school district saw the value of the program. And they have now written the VITA program into their business accounting curriculum, the CATE department, Career and Technology department, where any principal at any high school, if they want the VITA program at their high school, now their business teachers just have to pick from one of 3 curriculums that it has been okayed at their school or within the district to incorporate VITA into that curriculum. And so it's really helped strengthen the program down here. We work in partnership, and the school district is one of the big partners, and part of that is the counseling department. Now, the counseling department is the one that's working with the student for FAFSA completion. And so we coordinate with them so that when their counseling department and their counselors are out in the high schools, they're promoting the VITA site. Now, in our Brownsville School District, every high school now hosts a VITA site at their high school campus, which is run by high school volunteer tax preparers. There's usually one teacher who is the site coordinator in charge. They coordinate with the counseling department at the high schools to direct, to outreach to parents, the families of the school, and in each cluster that's beneath each high school. So all of the elementary schools and middle schools that feed into the high school, the school district is reaching out to those families to send them to the high schools to get their tax returns prepared. We also attend the school district will have a big not back to school, but financial aid awareness night in January, and they always invite us there. We make appointments. I bring staff. We make appointments there for tax returns, and I think they usually have over 5,000 parents attending that event. On your slide right here is the myfreetaxes.com facilitated self-assistance. So one of our VITA sites is the self-preparation site, where we teach people who are savvy with computers and speak English to prepare their own tax returns online. And the myfreetaxes.com is the software we've worked with for several years. We've actually been involved in developing that software to make it very user-friendly for nonprofits to use in the community. This has a higher threshold to be free. It's free for anyone with income under $62,000. But one of the good things about it is if someone's income is a little bit over $62,000, they can still use the software. There's just a fee associated with it. That's actually a very good thing because it's not exclusionary at all. So when we promote this on the campus, anyone can come by. We have Learn to File events where we'll have a facilitator. Go ahead and click to the next slide, please. So what we do is we have a facilitator who actually works out of the financial aid office at the University of Texas, formerly Texas at Brownsville, now it's called UTRGV. And they actually let us set up shop in the financial aid office. We have 4 to 6 computers there where staff and students come in, and their families are invited to come in, and they prepare their own tax return online using the myfreetaxes.com. The beauty of a facilitated self-assistance site in the VITA program is that there's just no liability because the clients are preparing their own tax returns. We have a VITA certified facilitator there that answers their questions, helps them get online. There's also a helpline associated with this software so that anyone, when they're in the middle of their tax return at myfreetaxes.com, can use the call-in helpline or email helpline and get their tax questions answered or just questions of how to work through the software. I've given you a screenshot here of the My Free Taxes. It has a new look this year, if any of you are familiar with it. United Way Worldwide has always been a partner in developing this program with the Walmart Foundation. But it's now this year been completely, ownership has transferred to United Way Worldwide. So it is now lives on the United Way website, and the new look is kind of goes with United Way now, as you see. I've circled there in yellow where partner login, that's kind of the access. If any organization wants to become a My Free Taxes partner and start providing the Learn to File or self-preparation filing, they can just sign up through this portal here and become a partner, and they have access to a lot of resources to outreach, market, and use the program. I've also circled there the File for Free in yellow. That's where the client would just click there and start their tax return. So next slide, please. So this is just a picture of some of the Learn to File events we've had at the university. This kind of shows our population here. We have a lot of young people, fresh out of high school, but then we also have a lot of young people with families or that are continuing to go to school. We work out of the financial aid office on campus. Next slide. So just to review, with myfreetaxes.com self-preparation, you can do federal and state taxes in all 50 states. It's free for those with income under $62,000, and the helpline is right there. Very easy. At the Learn to File event at the financial aid office, last year they did 491. They had students, families, and staff file tax returns at the financial aid office last year. Great program. And like I say, we usually work there the month of February. We do not do events that, in years past, we used to do financial aid night, and we would go do taxes the same night that the university was doing Fafsa completion events. But we've discovered now with the changes in the online Fafsa form, that with that Irs Retrieval tool, that most students and their families need to have done their tax return before the end of February. And they need to do that before they do their FAFSA application. So with the university now, the financial aid department actually outreaches to students and their family, but our outreach is to get students to come in early to do their taxes, and then after they've done their taxes, to then do their FAFSA form. And that's kind of a different marketing message than we've done before. Okay, so back up one slide, please. So this was if you need more information about VITA. Back up one more slide. Okay, this is if you want to sign up to be a My Free Taxes partner, you can just go to the www.myfreetaxes.com, go to the partner information, and register there. Stephanie Chen at United Way Worldwide is also kind of the go-to person for questions at the national level for My Free Taxes. Next slide is just different information about Link and Learn taxes. Understanding taxes is high school curriculum, and so a lot of our high school teachers will use that. Understanding taxes was developed by the Internal Revenue Service. Next slide is my information, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone or give anyone more information. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you, Karen. Now we'll hear from Amanda Grover with Goodwill Industries of West Michigan.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? All right, I'm going to go through and just start by explaining a little bit about my VITA program. It sounds like everyone has a pretty good understanding of the different tax preparation programs that are out there. I know every program operates a little bit differently, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So just to give you a little background and some idea as to the size of the community that I'm working in, we did about 2,700 tax returns during our most recent tax season. So it was about a little over 2,700. We calculated a community impact of over $3.2 million, and that's just covering 3 different counties that we serve through our Goodwill network. We had 9 different tax sites last tax season, but we're looking at actually reducing the number of them so that we can operate at larger capacities. We had just 40 volunteers, which is actually kind of a low number, and we hit all of our targets actually, surprisingly. So we had some really good volunteers this last tax season that really just volunteered a lot of hours, totaling more than 3,000. So to provide a little bit of a scope as to the size of our VITA program, I wanted to provide that background information so that you know a little bit more about the College Access Network partnership, how that developed, and what it looks like, just so that you have a clue. It's been a very slow start. We're heading towards our 3rd year of partnership, and our first year we only had 4 different families come in and participate in the program. But last year we were able to serve 16 families, so we're seeing a steady increase, and we're finding just a lot of time in each year as a new opportunity to learn and to reconsider what we're doing and what's going to work for the families that we're working with. So like I indicated, we operate for VITA services for West Michigan. We operate in 3 different counties. So we were at the table in one of the counties with a community, at a community meeting, and just talking a little bit about college access. And for me, even though I have a lot of background with the taxes and the tax program and everything VITA, it did take until I had been doing taxes for 2 years to kind of put those 2 pieces together, that the tax program is hugely vital to what they're doing with the Fafsa and the application for the student aid. So the fact that people were actually talking about this in my community is what really brought it to my attention and provided me kind of the oversight and the vision to see that this could work and that we could partner some of our programs and see where there's still some gaps and continue to work on helping to build bridges for some of those gaps that we have. So I had started off after this meeting by approaching 3 of our local, we call them College Access Networks, so you'll see that acronym CAN a lot throughout my slides. So be aware of that. I really am trying to avoid using the acronyms, but I think we all can understand the guilt behind that. At any rate, the three counties that we operate in, I had contacted the College Access Network. Here in Michigan, it was really helpful for me, and I would think any state, to get a little bit of information as to where the different college access networks are at, what some of their initiatives and focuses are. That's the first thing that I would recommend to anybody who's starting one of these partnerships or that's looking at possibly connecting with some of the college access programs in their area. So in Michigan, everything's broken down by county, and there's the college access networks that are created for each county. Just now we got a college access network finally for our last county that we assist in. So like I said, this is still kind of new and growing and building. While there's been a statewide college access network, it's just now been made a priority locally that all counties have what they call a college access network advisor and somebody to work with. So when we had started this partnership 2 years ago, I first just started with asking for the 2 counties that there were advisors to see if there was some sort of partnership and to look at if they would like to partner, if they were able to commit that time. Like I said, it's kind of new to some of their communities here in Michigan. But as we approached the college access networks, we were able to do some planning meetings and really identify some of the things that maybe would pose some issues and to work through some of those things. We saw this as a huge opportunity for all sorts of a win-win situation for people. It's a great volunteer recruitment for our VITA program. Another partner just gives us a whole nother access of network, more access to networks of people to talk to about the program so that they can learn more about the My Free Taxes that Karen had been talking about, so that they know about our My Free Taxes program, so that they know about the volunteer opportunities, so that they know about the impact of the program. It's obviously also good for the college access networks because it's another way to kind of entice parents and adults and even some of the youth into completing their taxes so that they can do the FAFSA application. It's obviously a really good community partnership showing that we're able to assist people with some more wraparound services, that it's not just taxes or it's not just FAFSA completion, that we're looking at working together and to help both programs increase numbers. So it's a really good way to just to use it as a platform to educate your community on what's going on, some of the needs and some of the gaps, and to reach different networks of people. So in coordinating our VITA and FAFSA events, there were a couple of things that, especially if you're planning on doing this, if you haven't done this before, if you're looking at coordinating a new event, there's quite a few things that you'll want to keep in mind. And some of these things we obviously had some sort of idea about after planning things throughout a tax season, but there were a few other things that we just had to try. And each community is going to be a little bit different. So it might be just trial and error in some of these instances, or looking at some of the previous events that you may have done. Maybe it's a Super Saturday for the VITA program. Maybe it's something that's not even related to the tax program specifically, but obviously everyone knows their community and can kind of work through some of these issues. So the first thing that we ran into was when we were going to plan the VITA FAFSA event. So we would first start out by doing the taxes for the clients as they came in, and then we would partner with the college access networks to provide the FAFSA assistance. So there were people through the FAFSA network that are very similar to VITA volunteers, where they're coming in and they're trained on how to do the paperwork to complete the student financial aid application, and are there to help people get those completed. So we basically first tried to coordinate what would work best in terms of the community and get people into the door. So we looked at the different dates that were possible. Obviously that's tricky with a VITA program. It's short, but at the same time there's crucial points. We didn't want to, it's hard because the student, the financial aid application is typically, they like to have them done by the end of February for students. So with our college access networks, coordinating the dates and times was something that was a bit of a challenge. And so especially if this is going to be your first year organizing some sort of partnership like this, I would first consider everyone's deadline and then start planning as far in advance as possible. And that's what we've done in the consequential years from when we started. So looking at the different dates and schedules, our community typically is still busy during Wednesday evenings for church functions, so we wanted to look at that. We made sure not to plan anything during those days and times. We wanted to make sure that the locations were something that was familiar and convenient for people. They were all held, for the most part. We've had 2 events during the last 2 years that were held at a community area that we have local community college classes, and that's affiliated with the school districts. And then aside from that, we've had all of our locations directly at the schools. I'll say that the better attended dates and times that we had segmented, those were located right at the school, and I think in part because, and I think they were in part successful because of the location, because people were used to going there. They had to go there anyway, especially the parents to pick up kids from school, from sports, and that sort of a thing. So the location is definitely something you'll want to make sure is easy and accessible to people. Another big thing that can take a little bit of coordinating is scheduling. I know for our tax program, we prefer to do everything by appointment just so that we can make sure we have enough volunteers available. And that's how a lot of the VITA, the FAFSA portion is for our college access networks as well. They don't have a whole lot of just open time where people can drop in. They like to do everything by appointment. So we coordinated a way to work with our high school advisors, and they were nice enough to be available to set up the appointments for the VITA and FAFSA completion dates. So we do everything all at once on site for people, and scheduling that for people, while it is a bit time consuming, as long as we like to be upfront with people about what the expectation is and how long it'll take, all of the clients and all the people that we had coming through were very agreeable and very just gracious for the help and very nice to work with. The marketing was another piece that's been kind of hard to coordinate. It ends up just taking a little bit longer between when you have so many partners and so many things that are at stake, and why one thing needs to be on the marketing information. That might be some sort of an IRS standard that the VITA program has, whereas the college access networks all have their required documentation, their required marketing pieces. So coordinating the marketing has been a bit of a challenge over the years, but we're finally getting it down to a science. So at this point, it's now just taking some updating as to what we're doing where. And then the outcomes, obviously, we wanted to make sure that the program is growing, that the results are increasing, and they in fact are. Our participation is up. So I think as we learn a little more each year, that it's definitely coming through, that we're hearing what people are saying, we're hearing what the people who are planning the events are saying. So we are seeing increased outcomes in not only the FAFSA completion, but as well as increased numbers for our VITA participants. So some of the lessons that were learned were, the big things was that the biggest lesson we learned in coordinating all of this with the various partners and I is that it's always going to end up taking more time than we ever plan on. So planning early is the biggest key to all of this and making sure that we're all achieving all of our goals. And so some of the tips that we found, if I'm going to suggest doing this to people, which it's a great opportunity to link services. So I do definitely recommend looking at some of the opportunity that you might have for events like this, whether it's just one day of an all-day event, or like ours, where we have 3 2-hour events, whatever works best for your community, you know. But some of the tips that I would like to just let people know about is getting familiar with the technology. So we had a few issues at some of the schools, even though we had tested to make sure that the TaxWise software that we have to use for the VITA completion is up to date and is working at each site. It doesn't always when you get there. It might be that you logged onto the system and you were able to get in and that was fine, but then there might be an actual printing issue. So I'd recommend doing at least one tax preparation at every site that you're going to be at, preparing taxes and doing the FAFSA completion. If people from the FAFSA end, if they're there from the college access networks, if they're coming to your site, to a tax site, then make sure that all of their software works completely. Go through as much of a trial as you can. Prepare the students and the parents for what to expect. We always let clients know for VITA that it's going to take about an hour. People for the FAFSA event typically tell people their piece is going to take an hour. So making sure that the parents and that the students know how long it's going to take, also what to bring with them. That was really key on our marketing pieces. We wanted to make sure that people had all the information that they needed to bring with them for the tax completion as well as the FAFSA completion. So our marketing materials were double-sided. The first side obviously had the information about the event, when and where and how to sign up. And then the back of the marketing piece had all of the information about what documents to bring to the actual event. We wanted to make sure to continue to approach community partners. Climates and things always change. So even if you're not successful immediately at finding a partner to work with on this, it wasn't until there was new staff with one of the college access networks that really ended up kicking all this off. So they brought it to our attention at a community meeting, like I said, that we needed that. There's a huge tax component to the FAFSA completion, and that they thought that it would be a good place for us to step in. Me not being so familiar with the FAFSA application, it took that new staff and that new person to bring it to the attention to get people excited about it. So when I realized that, yeah, it does kind of make sense. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. You know, I filled out FAFSA dozens of times. I don't know why I didn't see this, but I didn't. So sometimes it just takes new people to bring something to the table. So always communicate that. Always communicate that at various community meetings you're at. I'm always surprised to see who comes to the table and what people can bring and how excited they get. So make sure you're communicating this to all of your community partners. It's also a wonderful opportunity for different grant funding. If you're looking at partnering different events and different programs in such a fashion. So make sure you're communicating that to your local funders, whether it's just to fund a specific event, whether it's to support the current programming. It's always great to talk about and to make sure that everyone knows. And lastly, I can't say this enough, is just start as early as possible. Make sure everyone's at the table who you want them to be. Make sure you're considering weather. Make sure you're considering schedules, all of those parts and pieces. And it usually takes doing a couple of events to kind of get that down and give you some familiarity about what to plan for. So those are my biggest pieces. My contact information is right here on the screen. As always, feel free to get a hold of me if you have any further questions or any more specific questions. Also, I believe at the end of this, all of our contact information is available if you haven't had the opportunity to write it down yet. And with that, I am all set.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. We really appreciate you sharing. And now we will turn to Christine Chen.
So thank you, Roxy, for inviting us to speak on kind of our experiences with starting a financial aid program. Thank you also to CVPP for their ongoing support of the VITA community. So I'm going to talk just briefly about kind of our organizational overview just to get to the heart of the matter about starting a financial aid program. Ladder Up is based in Chicago. We're a nonprofit organization started in 1994. We offer 3 core services: free tax return preparation, financial aid application assistance, and college access services, and then lastly, financial education. So just to give us kind of a sense of scope on the VITA program, last year we had over 1,000 volunteers prepare 10,000 tax returns at 19 sites. In terms of kind of our history of putting tax with FAFSA, it was something that we started back in 2003. We had some volunteers who came out of our state's education agency, the name of which is Illinois Student Assistance Commission, ISAC. You'll hear me refer to them later as that. And they initially said, you know, there's great, obviously, as you heard from the other presenters, there's a lot of overlap between tax and financial aid, and we can really incorporate these things and bring them together at the tax site. So, you know, we got on board with that, and we continue to offer some degree of FAFSA training to our volunteers between 2003 and 2009. But if you move on to the next slide, what we also started to do kind of in parallel is to run our own financial aid program that had really nothing to do with the tax site. So we started it up in the 2004-2005 school year, and we approached Chicago Public Schools. So, you know, we're in a very kind of different environment than other people. We have a lot of density. We have one school district that covers more than 100 high schools. It's just our largest district in the nation. So if you're going to talk to anybody who's going to give you access to high school students, you know, this was the one partner that we had to get on board. And we approached them and said, you know, we're not trying to replace any of your staff, your counseling staff, but we want to augment what they do. We know that a lot of times there's a really bad ratio of counselor to seniors, and we want to help, you know, bring extra hands to the table to help students really access the money they need to go on to college. And so we had this partnership started with Chicago Public Schools. We had FAFSA training provided to us by our state education agency, ISAC, and what we did is we just went on site to schools during the daytime, right after school, in the evening if that's what the school preferred, and we were offering FAFSA assistance directly to students. So really, in the next kind of few years after 2004, 2005, we really had kind of a push-pull thing here where we started to pull back what we were doing with FAFSA at our tax sites for a couple of reasons that you see highlighted on the screen. At the same time, we were kind of pushing more towards doing things on site where we knew our clients were already present. You know, you go into the high schools, they're already there, versus kind of sifting through people at the tax site who might want to do this or who might have a child in the family who wants to go on to higher education. One thing I will mention here, and this is something that I know other programs nationwide have been talking about this, what we started to see increasingly kind of in the late 2000s was really seeing there were a lot more FAFSA metrics out there. Some of the state agencies across the country have a partnership with the Department of Education where they can release individual level data about which students have completed the FAFSA and thus which students haven't. And so for Chicago Public Schools, FAFSA completion percentage is part of the metrics that their counselors are being held to. And so now there's more, there's a quantifiable performance measure out there, and I think that's why you're seeing increased diligence about making sure people know that financial aid is available and making sure that those who are eligible are actually submitting those applications on time. So the next slide just kind of shows, this is basically the phasing out of FAFSA at our tax sites, which was what you see in blue, and then of course the increase in the number of clients served through financial aid assistance at their schools through our independent program. So the next part that I want to talk about is just some of the things that we've noticed are really important for the success of an independent program. So the first thing is definitely strong and effective partnerships. You have to get that school district or multiple districts in some cases on board because they're going to give you access to the students and the parents. I mentioned this before, you really want to make sure that you connect with your state education agency because they're in the know about grant programs that may be in effect in your state, and then also they're your link to Department of Education. Local colleges, including community colleges, we found that that's been a really great partnership to have. They also want to make sure that their students are filing renewal FAFSAs to continue to go to their institutions, so they can be a really good link as well. They probably want to attract some of the high school students that you're working with. And then finally, other nonprofits. There are a lot of other nonprofits, at least here in Chicago, that are interested in college access work. It's good to kind of get a gauge on what other people are kind of in the field, what they're doing, and how you can work with them to advance the college access mission as a whole. The other thing, too, that you obviously have to have is really great full-time and seasonal staff members. It's not necessarily the case that everybody has to have had financial aid experience in the past, but somebody on your staff having that is really critical so they know how to navigate the waters. The other thing, too, is that members really need to take into account that they're going to see a lot of variance in terms of the strength of certain partners. Some partners are really good and organized. They can get their students there and they're prepared. Some people are newer in their position and you don't have a lot of students show up to a session. So they have to be accommodating but maintain that kind of professionalism no matter what they see from a partner. Related to training, like I said before, you definitely want to link up with your state education agency because they may be able to give you training directly or at least point you to some resources. On a national level, there are also some resources available. You can see the list there, kind of related to college access networks, as Amanda was saying earlier. NCAN, which is, of course, the national coalition of kind of all of those networks, is a fantastic resource. There's also, what we found is there's a need to constantly be training your staff because you really want to inform them about all aspects of the financial aid cycle. We initially, when we started in 2003 and 4 and 5, we were only focused on filling out the FAFSA. But in reality, that's just one piece of financing college. You need to be able to provide information to students and parents in the fall so they're ready to file the FAFSA in the winter. But then there's also a lot of follow-up needs kind of in the spring related to understanding award letters that they receive from the colleges, having to make corrections on a submitted FAFSA. So there's some other things going on besides just this one application. So we found that it's good to provide training throughout that cycle so that our staff members are prepared. One other thing too to understand is kind of what your student population is. We found that in Chicago, for instance, we have a really high population of undocumented students who, while they're not eligible for federal financial aid, still want to go to college, might not be able to finance it. So what we've been able to do is work with partners to develop a scholarship list that have no citizenship requirements. So it's good to kind of, again, understand who you're serving. What we found, too, is with our workshops, we really try to make them curriculum-based. So meaning we want to have structure where there are lesson plans, learning objectives, outcomes. Those are the terms that our teachers and counselors work in, and so we want to really kind of cater to them and make kind of have that same standard for our own workshop offerings. Related to responsiveness, this is something where our program has changed a lot over the past 10 years because of what we've heard from our partners and what they've said they've wanted and what the students need. So it's really critical just to keep that feedback loop open with your partners, hear what they are asking for, what their parents and their students are asking for. You know, we start out with just doing Fafsa applications. Since that time, we do informational sessions, we do understanding award letters, understanding student loans, how to write personal statements. So there are really a lot of needs out there, and if you can meet them, you just want to be able to hear from your partners what those new needs are. And then the final thing I would say here is results tracking. Kind of the thing I should have said right at the beginning is if you're thinking about starting your own program, financing it is critical. If you've got grantors who are willing to support this, they're going to want to see results and hard numbers. So it's really critical that you do have a results tracking system in place so that you know what's going on and that you can report that progress back to your donors. So there's just some contact information for us at Ladder Up, and I want to throw it back to Roxy for some Q&A.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you again to all of our presenters, and you shared a lot of information, so we want to go ahead and open it up to questions. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box, and we'll have Evelyn who will share the questions for our presenters to respond to.
So the first question we have is, do any of the presenters have any best practices for recruiting volunteers for Fafsa? Our VITA program is running smoothly, but this is our first year partnering with local organizations to offer Fafsa. Any advice would be appreciated.
Okay, so Karen, Amanda, Christine, do any of you all have suggestions for recruiting volunteers?
This is Karen in Texas. We have not had great success at cross-training volunteers, especially with the VITA program. It is so intense, the requirements to become like a volunteer tax preparer, that then trying to add on other training to that, it has just not worked that much for us. I know with doing the My Free Taxes project at the University Financial Aid Office, that often the work-study students, the Financial Aid Office has been able to assign work-study students to train on the My Free Taxes software and help students do the software piece. They, just like that, the Financial Aid Office uses work-study or AmeriCorps students to do FAFSA applications, they've tasked them with the My Free Taxes piece too. That's all I have to offer on FAFSA and volunteers.
Amanda or Christine, do you have anything to add?
Not really. Karen covered a lot. I mean, I haven't seen, this is Amanda, I haven't seen very good volunteer cross-training with the two items. I think they both need to be separate. The school districts have identified a few people that have been willing to do the FAFSA completion portion, and then our VITA program continually recruits for volunteers for the VITA portion, but we've ended up having to keep those as two separate things at any rate. And that's about all I can say on that as well.
This is Christine. Just from our experience in the recent past using volunteers, I think some tax people are interested in it because it's sort of similar in the sense of there's kind of a long, complicated application that keeps people from getting benefits. How can we kind of work through that to get somebody where they want to be? So I think there is some appeal there, but I think there is a time issue also. Can you really add on financial aid training on top of the already kind of time-consuming VITA training? But I think that when you put this opportunity out there, this opportunity to work with students to help them kind of achieve their college dreams, you get response from volunteers who might not be interested in tax, who say, tax is too technical, I don't do math, you know, they put up all those things, but they say, okay, working with a student one-on-one, you know, through, and you can kind of, if you have a staff person who's in the room who can help that volunteer out, I think that presents, it kind of opens the door to, I think, maybe a different kind of volunteer than if you were to put out there the tax volunteering opportunity. So I think there's opportunity out there. It might just be a slightly different pool of people than you imagined for tax.
And this is Karen Ann. I just want to reiterate about how important it is to work in partnership on these types of outreaches. So for instance, your universities, your community colleges, they have staff, they have departments whose job is to help get the FAFSA done. So, you know, why recruit your own volunteers when you can partner with someone who brings resources like people? So just keep that in mind.
Thank you for those answers. We'll move on to our next question. What resources can be provided to families that are concerned about ways to finance for college? Do you have our presenters care to answer?
This is Christine. Certainly there are a lot of resources available online. Department of Education has a lot of information online, kind of deciphering what are the different types of aid, what do you have to pay back, what don't you have to pay back, what are the different types of loans, all of those kinds of things. So that's a nice resource. And then, you know, there are, you know, agencies like National College Access Network, and within your own state, you may have a college access network that also provides resources. It's really that information is out there. You really just need to connect to it. It's a lot of times, you know, the things that we've made, we don't really have to make our own materials in some ways. There's really a lot out there that you just need to find and utilize.
And this is Amanda. I can't really speak to that very well because as like the presentation showed, I'm mostly on the tax end of things, so I don't really have much information as far as that's concerned.
Thank you. We will move on. Our next question is more of a technical one, so we can follow up later, but if any of you know what is required to complete the FAFSA?
Yeah, that would be more technical than I could give you.
We'll follow up to the person who answered that. We'll include that in the resources that we'll be providing later this week or early next week with a follow-up on this webinar. Moving on. Oh, yes, pardon me.
I can expand a little on the tax piece of that. In other words, the client needs to have prepared their tax return, and that tax return needs to have been accepted by the Internal Revenue Service, and it needs to live on their server before the student within the FAFSA online application will click the Irs Retrieval tool, which will load their tax return information directly from what's on file at the IRS's database. Now, this often confuses families and students because the application online will still let them manually input their tax return data, but what students don't realize often is that the application doesn't really close until the Internal Revenue's information comes from their database. And I know sometimes students are confused. They think they've done the tax piece, but it hasn't really been completed.
Thank you. Another question that we have for our presenters is, what advice can you offer to a site that is just starting?
Partner with an experienced site. Get you can often invite someone to be a co-site coordinator. I know if we have a new VITA site, we'll often assign an experienced site coordinator to be co-coordinators with a new site. So if your coalition leader's not doing that, then just try to reach out in the network of your VITA network and ask someone with experience to come help you the first week for sure.
Okay.
This is Amanda. Like I said, I think just early planning is a huge piece to that, and to kind of dovetail on what Karen was indicating, if there is a gap that you're seeing that your agency and your volunteers are not able to cover, that's when the partnerships can really set in, but you've got to have the time to facilitate those sort of relationships and partnerships.
Well, thank you again for addressing those questions, and if anyone has any additional questions later on, we will certainly reach out to our presenters to respond to them. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for today's virtual training presentation. We hope that you found this information useful, and we encourage you to go to our website. We are in the process of updating the website and all of the outreach materials, so by the end of the week, you will see a new look. We are giving you a preview of our new branding here, so we'll be the Get It Back campaign, so you can look for that in the future. And again, if you have any questions for us, you can reach us through this email. Thank you again for joining, and we will be in touch with you soon.